Hi there, Andrea here, your friendly neighborhood surrogate. You're watching part 2 of the Surrogate weight loss series. In the last video, we talked about why it's important for us to be under 30 BMI before we start a surrogacy, and I also shared with you my own weight loss journey that led me up to the ketogenic diet. So, in this video, as promised, I'm going to go more in depth into what the ketogenic diet entails, and we're also going to talk about hacking your hormones. You're going to see the role that insulin plays in your metabolic process. This is stuff I wish I would have known all along, and it's just something that was recently brought to my attention. So if you're only going to watch one video, make it this video. This is the meat, not potatoes, just the meat of this series, okay? Let's get started. Okay, so to take you on this next part of the journey, I'm going to take you on a visual journey to the lives of our ancestors. So think Paleolithic ancestors, think a couple 100,000 years ago, before agrarian society, or before we really started farming and domesticating animals, staying in one place. They were hunters and they were gatherers, right? You've heard that term hunter-gatherer before. Well, our bodies are powerfully adapted to that life because there were times of feast, there were times of famine, usually revolving around the seasons. So think about this. So here's a life of a ancestor that we have. And they're roaming the wilderness during the summer. There's berries everywhere. There's fruit, and there's tons of animals, and there's tons because they are procreating it during this time in spring and summer, right? Fall rolls around. Things start getting cooler, and there's still some food to be picked. There's still some animals to be chased. But when winter rolls around, those animals kind of go off, and their numbers have dwindled. A lot of them hibernate. There might be some small game around, but for the most part, food is scarce. Time of feast, time of famine, right? Our bodies are so good at adapting to this, but how? How does that work? Well, you can kind of visualize it by thinking about a bear. Yes, we're not bears, but we are similar in the way that we store fat and then we use it when we need it. I mean, it's pretty freaking logical, guys, right? You store fat when you have abundance and you're eating constantly, and you use the fat that you've stored when you need it because there's nothing around, right? That's how we've lived. That's how we've survived. That's how we've adapted over all these millennia to be who we are today. So the idea behind the ketogenic diet, and more specifically a Paleolithic diet, is that we really haven't evolved, like, for lack of a better term. I know evolution's kind of one of those subjects that people are like, we haven't really adapted out of that sort of way of living. Now, bring you back to modern days. I know that many people look at skinny girls who can eat anything they want and never gain a pound, and they're jealous. They're like, man, that bitch, that sucks. Like, she can eat anything she wants and she never gains a pound. That's just not fair. And youth does that to an extent. We have a higher metabolism when we're young. But I want to tell you that the person who is well into their 30s or 40s, who can eat anything that she wants and doesn't gain any weight, is metabolically broken. I know that's not probably a popular opinion, and it's not what you're expecting. But somebody who does not gain weight is metabolically broken. If you have excess fat on your body, then you are properly utilizing what your body has, okay? You're properly doing what your body was designed to do, okay? You're storing fat. The problem is our bodies aren't designed to carry it for a long amount of time. Our joints can't really handle it. Our heart can't really handle it. We're supposed to store up some fat for winter or scarcity, and then use it, and then do it again in cycles. Okay, feasting and fasting. And we're going to use the terms feasting and fasting quite a bit as we go along in this series, but I want you to get this picture. We're designed to eat when there's food and eat what's on our body that we have stored when there's not food. And in this day and age, we don't really have to worry about it, especially if you live in the United States. Even if you're poor, you still have plenty. You still have plenty to eat, plenty of calories, plenty of nutrition's another situation altogether, but there's plenty of calories, okay? And some food is cheap. And unfortunately, that's the least nutritious food, but there's plenty of calories that you can have for very, very little money and very, very little effort. You don't have to go out and hunt, and you don't have to go out and gather. You basically have to roll around to McDonald's and order off the value menu. You know what I'm saying? So plenty of food. We don't have to deal with it anymore, but our bodies are still in that state where you store during times of feast and you use what you've reserved during times of famine. Now let's talk about the role insulin plays in this process. I call it the storage hormone. Think about that for a second. Okay, so we take what we need when there's plenty and we store it in our body. Okay, so insulin is how that happens. Insulin is what our body uses in order to store. What causes insulin to spike? Sugar, starch, any kind of carbohydrates. So let's back up a little bit here and talk about the macronutrients. There's fat, there's protein, and there's carbohydrates. Now, for years, we've been taught that carbohydrates are a superior source of energy because they give you all this energy and you burn, and there's fewer calories. And everybody has the idea of calories in, calories out. You got to burn more calories than you take in. You got to burn more calories than you take in, or you're going to gain weight. Got to burn more. Hold up a second here. There's a few more calories per gram of protein, and there's a lot more calories per gram of fat. If you were running a car, would you want the fuel that gave you the most miles per gallon, or you would want the fuel that gave you the least miles per gallon? I know this is kind of a flip. It's kind of a 180 here. You're like, hold on a second. If you were a car, you'd want the most miles per gallon. If you were one of our Paleolithic ancestors, you would definitely want the most miles per gallon because you don't know when the next time is that you're going to be able to eat, right? Okay, I know that doesn't make sense yet, but let's talk about this for a second here. Carbohydrates are fast energy. The problem with that is maybe 30 minutes after you eat, you're freaking hungry again. So what happens is insulin comes in, breaks these things down, turns them into fuel, you burn them off, and then your body starts panicking, I'm hungry, and it starts giving you cravings. So then you eat more. And then 30 minutes later, you're hungry again, so you eat more. So you eat more, and you eat more, and you eat more. And before you know it, you've quadrupled the number of calories you could have used if you just stuck with the one thing. I hope this is making sense so far. Back to the role insulin plays. Insulin is breaking down these, right? It's also storing whatever you don't use right away. So if you have an excess of carbohydrates, it crams them into the cells as fat. If you have an excess of protein, it crams it into your cells as fat. If you have an excess of fat, obviously, it's going to cram into the cells as fat. Why would your body store fat? Your body stores fat because it's preferred fuel. Because again, more miles per gallon, right? Your body knows that it can get the most work, the most energy out of this one up here. And it's not just about calories, it's about the quality of the fuel. You get more mileage per gallon up here in this fat category than you do down here. Yes, this is quick energy. This is like, I only got $5 and I need to fill my tank until I can get to the next place so I can make more money and get the good fuel. You know what I'm saying? Okay, this will be used, and then it triggers insulin, which stores its preferred hormone. Or I'm sorry, its preferred macronutrient, which is fat. Okay, so what the state of ketosis does is it eliminates this pretty much. I mean, you have some carbs, but you're not spiking your insulin. The goal is to never spike your insulin because you're burning off what you have. If you are 30 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, 100 pounds overweight, like I was in 2005, you have all the fuel you need. You don't even need to eat. Whoa, Andrea's saying starve herself. No, I'm not. I'm not saying starve yourself. I'm saying you have all the food you need, all the energy you need stored on your body. That's what you were designed to do. If you have fat stored on your body, you are metabolically sound and your body knows what it's supposed to be doing. It wants to use that fat as energy. But if you keep spiking your insulin, it's never going to use that fat. It's going to keep storing. So that's the bottom line. Spike your insulin, your body's going to store. If you're constantly storing, are you using what you already have? The answer is no, in case you didn't know what the finger meant. Here's some ideas of meals. I tracked all my meals on Instagram when I started the ketogenic diet. Here's some ideas of meals that are high in fat, moderate in protein, and low in carbohydrates. And the goal with the ketogenic diet is nutritional ketosis, which means, like I said, you're not spiking your insulin constantly. You're staying out of storage mode and you're in burning mode, but you're also staying satiated, and psychologically you're in a place where you're not feeling like you're hungry. And remember, that was one of my criteria. I have to feel like I'm full. If I feel like I'm starving all the time, I'm going to be miserable and it's not going to be sustainable. We talk about the macronutrients, and for the ketogenic diet, there's kind of a guideline of a percentage, a ratio. You want 70% fat, 25% protein, and then the other 5% to be carbohydrates. And as a general rule, you don't want to go over 20 carbohydrates in a day. And now it's going to vary. It's going to vary from person to person. You know, each person can handle a different number of carbohydrates at one time, but it's just a general rule. 70, 25, 5 is a good place to start. Don't go over 20 carbohydrates in a day. And when I first started, I didn't worry too much about how many calories I was taking in. I worried more about my ratios. So I just ate until I was full. I did keep track of my calories on an app, just so I could know what was going on and not go too crazy. But the truth is, I usually didn't even hit a 1,500 calorie goal because I was eating so much fat. I just felt satiated all the time, and I wasn't even eating my whole portions. And we can talk about net carbs versus, total carbs, and we can talk about all these things and nitpick and whatnot. But the basic idea is this: don't spike your insulin. Stay out of storage mode, and you're going to become we're going to come to a state of nutritional ketosis. Now, there is a small transition period where you're burning carbohydrates and you're moving to burning fat. And this can be uncomfortable for people because most of us have never been out of storage mode. Most of us have never gone without carbohydrates for more than a couple hours, let alone several days. And the process takes a different amount of time for each person, just like the amount of carbs people can tolerate is different from person to person. But it can be anywhere from 24 hours to a whole entire week. It could take you to switch to burning fat versus burning carbohydrates. In that time, like I said, it's uncomfortable. You're going to have cravings because you've never gone this long without eating carbohydrates. You're going to feel run down. You're going to feel kind of like you have the flu. And they actually call this the keto flu because your body, it's panicking because it's so used to carbohydrates, and it's panicking. It's like, I need fuel. And then finally it starts to remember. And this sounds really cheesy that it starts to remember, but that's really what it's doing. It hasn't been fat adapted since you were an infant. It starts to remember what it's supposed to do. And when that starts to happen and you start burning ketones instead of burning glucose, let me tell you something. It's it's euphoric. And I know that also sounds silly and cheesy, but you feel so much better. Cravings are strong in the beginning, and then you get to this euphoric stage. And then, depending on your relationship with food, you could potentially continue having cravings. You could potentially still feel an addiction to sugar because sugar is an extremely addictive substance. But for the most part, you feel really good burning ketones. Your brain, it just functions better. This is all anecdotal. This is all me just saying my experience and the experience of my keto community, people that I talk with regularly. But yeah, you really function at a higher level when you have ketones instead of glucose, and you're not panicking. Your body's not panicking about the next meal because it knows there's fat stored on this body and we're burning fat. And we like it. So we're going to keep going after those fat stores and we're not panicking. So from a psychological standpoint, it feels different. And from a physical standpoint, it feels different. From a cognitive standpoint, it's amazing, you guys. All right. And there's all kinds of products out there that you can try. And like I said, you can nitpick till you're blue in the face. Bottom line, quit spiking your insulin during this time. Get fat adapted, and you're going to burn all the fat off your body, and it happens in lightning speed. Okay, well, that's the end of this video. In the next video, and I think it's going to be the final video, I will go over some meal plans for you. I will give you some ideas of things you can eat at home. I will give you some ideas of things that you can eat from drive-thrus so that you can make life a little bit convenient for yourself, and some substitutions that you can use when you're eating out at a sit-down restaurant. Okay, so that's my goal for the next video. Bye.